Captain Yugioh, and welcome back. It's actually kind of funny. I was actually planning on making a Battlegrounds video to put up today, and as I was just like minding my own business, suddenly an entire update comes in, and now we got like a bunch of heroes and like all these different changes, but most importantly of all, we've got dragons. Let's take a look at all these little changes, but before anything else, don't forget to like the video if you approve of this, comment down below about your thoughts on the topic, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more things. We got Overwatch videos on Tuesdays, Hearthstone videos on Thursdays like today, and Yu-Gi-Oh videos go up every Friday. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. So, first up on the list, we're going to talk about all of the new heroes, and we have a bunch of new heroes that are pretty much just all... I think they're pretty much just all dragons. They're almost entirely dragons. This is like, in celebration of the patch being the Dragon Patch, we got a bunch of new dragon-based heroes. And the first one on the list is Galakrond. So, Galakrond is in the format now, and he's got a new hero power, Galakrond's Greed, which for 1 coin allows you to replace a minion in Bob's Tavern with a minion that is a tier higher than that. And it's basically kind of like Toki in a way, but instead of getting the full refresh where you just shuffle out all the board, you just can pick a single minion to upgrade to its next tier up, and it's like, that's insane. That's kind of ridiculous, honestly. Like, I just got through with a match, actually, where I was playing as Galakrond, and it's like, the easy strat with that is just, let's just freeze a minion, upgrade it to the next tier, and then just keep doing that until we have tier 6 minions. Like, you can get to tier 5 and just hang around tier 5 for a good long while, without ever hitting tier 6, mind you, just so you can get like these tier 5 minions and then upgrade them to tier 6. It's, like, it's basically like spend a coin, automatically get a tier 6. And of course, granted, we have so many tier 6 minions now that it's like you don't really get a guarantee on getting the one you want, but I still managed to top anyway, so that's a thing. So next up on the list we have Deathwing, who has his own hero power, which, yeah, pretty much means that or something like that. It's basically a passive that gives every single minion in play plus 3 attack. You heard that right. Every single minion, yours, mine, ours, theirs, his, hers, Deathwings. It's just the minions that are on the board when you're fighting Deathwing, or when Deathwing's fighting you. And pretty much the general strat on that is basically like, you can take advantage of this. Like, the way I managed to do it with Deathwing was actually I used, like, minions that could replace themselves with other minions. So usually you think of stuff like Mechano Egg, Rat Pack, Mackerel, stuff like that, where just like when it dies, it replaces itself with a little minion. Well, since every minion's getting plus 3 attack, you can basically power up every single one of your minions. And granted, even though your opponent's also getting it, chances are, you know, Rat Pack's actually really good with this, because it's like, you can have a 5/2 on board that summons 5 4/1s, and there's not a whole lot of health that can, like, impact that. Like, your opponent is, chances are, not playing around your hero power most of the time, and it's hard to predict that. So Deathwing's pretty strong, I gotta say. I definitely like Deathwing a little bit, you know, maybe I'm just a little biased because I just like Deathwing. Deathwing's really cool. He just likes to blow things up. He's really big on that. That's his thing. So next we have Yugioh, who has the Dream Portal hero power, which for 1 gold refreshes Bob's Tavern and adds a random dragon to it. Again, this is kind of similar to Toki's hero power, where you refresh the tavern, but you get an extra minion. And in the case of Yugioh, it's to add a specific dragon, which, considering the pool of dragons is pretty good right now, like, dragons are pretty strong, Yugioh is probably a good pick to go into, because, like, you have the potential to get, like, well, we'll get into all the dragons later, because they had to add in a bunch of dragons. Moving right along, we have Dormu, who has the passive hero power of Clairvoyance, where your first refresh every single turn is absolutely free. You can refresh the tavern for free. That can be pretty good, because that means it's like you can look at the board and you're just kind of like, okay, I don't really like this, but I don't really like spending a coin. Or, like, even in, like, turn 1, it's like, okay, these tier 1 minions kind of are terrible and the like, but if I get a free reroll, then maybe I can get a better minion, something that I like, something that I want to work with. It's not a guaranteed anything, but it's a pretty neat hero power that allows you to try and, like, roll for better minions, and at the very least, it gives you basically it's paying you an extra coin every single turn, because like you have that extra coin that you don't spend on the reroll. So that can actually be pretty important down the road. So something else to keep in mind with Nozdormu is just he's granting you a coin in a roundabout sort of way. Then we get to Meleegos, who has Arcane Alteration, which costs absolutely nothing, but you have to actually, you know, trigger it. It's not a passive. You know what it's like. And basically with this one, you can replace a minion with any other minion of the same tavern tier as the minion that you're replacing. So what does that mean? Well, like let's say you have Alley Cat, a tier 1 minion. You play that down, you get a tier 1 Tabby Cat, right? Well, you can basically use Arcane Alteration on the extra Tabby Cat to transform it into another tier 1 minion. So you could get like a Fiendish Servant, you can get another Alley Cat. It basically just helps transform it into something different that might be more beneficial to you. I don't know if this is going to be necessarily a tremendously impactful ability. It really kind of depends, I guess, more so in what you roll into or what you're hoping to achieve with the different compositions. But, you know, it's interesting. Then we come to the Queen of Dragons herself, Alexstrasza, who basically just has a passive hero power which doesn't really do anything until you hit tier 5, and once you hit tier 5 you get to discover 2 dragons for free. So you basically want to try, I guess, to work on dragon synergy with Alexstrasza, so that way when you get to tier 5 you get 2 free dragons, which the only problem with that is that there are dragons across all of the tiers. Most of them are like kind of up near like tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, and that sort of thing. And there's like a couple of tier 1, tier 2 minions, and there's a few at tier 6 that are dragon synergistic, but ultimately it's kind of like, it's a little debatable as to whether or not that's like a crazy good thing, honestly. It could be like, it could be very high rolling, that's the thing. It's kind of like, it makes me think of AFK's hero power, where it's like, you skip your first 2 turns, but then you get to discover 2 tier 3 minions, right? So it's kind of like, there's a lot of variance in terms of like how good the actual minions are, but, you know, you could still get really good minions. And finally, we come to the heroic, adventurous, draconic Reno Jackson himself. He finally has made it. He's joined in with Bran Bronzebeard and Sir Finley and Elise. Except Elise, I think, is the only one who's currently in rotation right now. Bran and Finley have just not been around for a little bit. Reno Jackson comes into the field, and he actually comes with a really cool hero power. We're gonna be rich. And basically, it's a 4 mana, it costs you 4 gold coins, and you get to turn a card into gold. Now, this doesn't trigger any sort of, like, you know, you don't get a card that's like Discover, you know, a tier upgraded minion, you know, it's not like that. You're basically just upgrading a minion into a golden version of itself, which is still really powerful. The only catch is, this is a once per game effect, meaning you can, for your particular match of Battlegrounds, you only get that once. So you really want to pick out a really good minion, which maybe that's the topic of my next video, perhaps, is just picking out the best minions for Reno Jackson to make golden at any given point in the ladder. But I was actually able to use Reno to get up to like 2nd place, and I was riding off of like 3 health for the majority of a match at one point. It was kind of crazy. So, needless to say, that power is extremely impactful, so don't underestimate Reno, because if he gets the right minion and makes it gold, you can expect a huge upset in terms of like how the game's gonna go. It's gonna be insane. And speaking of insanity, let's talk about all of the new minions, because there's a bunch of minions now. Like they had to get all this dragon tribal synergy stuff into the game, but also they actually added some other minions for like other strategies, essentially. First off, at tier 1 we have Dragon Spawn Lieutenant, who is a 2/3 dragon with taunt. It's kind of like Vulgar Homunculus because it has taunt, but it also doesn't come with the drawback of you losing 2 life. Basically, this is a really strong tier 1 minion. This is probably up there in like terms of tier 1 minion strength. Like, jeez, it's really strong, I gotta say. Like, this is absolutely insane to have at tier 1. The other big minion at tier 1 is Red Whelp, and this one's actually really, really strong in a dragon-centered strategy. Basically, it's a 1/2 dragon that at the start of each combat, at the very start of combat, it'll deal 1 damage to a particular minion up to the number of dragons you have in play. So let's say you have Red Whelp on the field, tier 1. You have a 1/2 dragon on board. Well, you have a dragon on board, meaning you get to deal 1 damage to one of your opponent's enemy minions this combat. So usually, like, let's say if they have a Mackerel, well, you basically just exhausted one of the Mackerel's resources. Or let's say they have Selfless Hero. You just got rid of Selfless Hero right away. That means you don't have to trade in as a 1/2 to a 2/1. That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of power level that Red Whelp has. But that also scales upward as it goes further. Like, the more dragons you have, the higher the damage you'll be dealing to an individual minion goes. So you could be dealing as much as 7 damage to 1 minion at the start of combat. It's kind of insane. And you get multiple Red Whelps, then you basically are dealing that like two different minions and the like. And if you get it to a certain, if you make it golden, then you're dealing twice that much damage. It can be really, really strong and really, really impactful. Definitely keep an eye out on Red Whelp. And then moving on up to tier 2, we have the Glyph Guardian, which is a 2/4 dragon, which is identified as a mage card. Don't know what that means exactly. Maybe that's going to be introduced into the game at some point? But anyways, this is a 2/4 dragon that actually, whenever it attacks, doubles its attack, which if you get some of these dragon buffs that are available, which, by the way, there are some dragon buffs available, this thing can be really strong. Like, say you pair it up with Deathwing, for instance. This becomes a 5/4 that when it attacks is a 10/4. That can be really strong against some really big minions. So that's a tremendously valuable thing. And when it's golden, its attack triples. And whenever it attacks, it gets 3 times the amount. That's insanity right there. That's absolutely insane. Like, Jesus, that's a strong dragon right there. So definitely keep an eye out for that guy, because he can get so much value so quickly. Then we come to a somewhat less exciting dragon, but also one that's pretty valuable in and of itself, the Steward of Time, which is another 2/4 dragon, but it has a very unique effect in terms of, well, just Battlegrounds in general. Basically, you buy this minion and you play this minion, nothing happens. But when you sell the minion, it actually gives all of the minions that are in Bob's Tavern +1/+1. Now, this may not sound exciting at first, but, you know, it's basically like the Dancing Daryl effect, where you're giving all of the minions +1/+1. Or like, the Ice Dragon, what is it, Syndragosa? Syndragosa, yeah, where you freeze all the minions and they get +1/+1, but you don't have to wait the next turn to have that happen. So Steward of Time can actually be pretty valuable, and again, this affects all kinds of minions, and if you manage to get multiple Stewards of Time, well then gee, you can just keep doing that sort of thing, and you could even get to a point where you actually get triple copies of Steward of Time, so you get to discover a new card of a tier higher than that, higher than your current tier, and then when you sell it, you might be giving, what, +2/+2 to all the minions in Bob's Tavern? So, it's not going to happen very often, I don't think, but still, the power of increasing the stats of minions by +1/+1 even, that's pretty valuable. And then we come across Wax Rider Todd Waggle, who actually is not a dragon. He's a Cobalt. You knew that already, guys, come on. Anyways, this is another tier 2 minion who is actually just a 1/2, but he does have some synergies within dragon builds. In fact, he's a very powerful synergy with dragons. Whenever one of your dragons kills an enemy minion, whether that's attacking the minion or whether it's, well, being attacked by a minion and killing that minion, Todd Waggle gets +2/+2. That can be really, really strong, and it can ramp up very, very quickly. So it's something that's like in dragon-centered builds. Todd Waggle is, I don't know about saying he's a must pick, but he's definitely in the early stages of the game a really good pick, because he can get those stat boosts pretty fast. Like, you get the 2/3 taunt, well, that 1/2 Todd Waggle is about to become a 3/4 Todd Waggle, and that's not even getting into the golden copy where he gets +4/+4. So Todd Waggle is definitely a very big part of dragon builds, especially in the early game stages of Battlegrounds, so definitely something to keep an eye on. And then we come to the Unstable Ghoul, which is actually a card that actually is in the game of Hearthstone. This is one of 2 cards that actually got transferred from the actual game of Hearthstone into Battlegrounds. And Unstable Ghoul is actually really important because he's a 1/3 taunt with the Death Rattle to deal 1 damage to every single minion. This is actually really important because Divine Shield is a really powerful ability within the context of Battlegrounds. basically, with your unstable Ghoul, if it gets attacked by your opponent and they have a bunch of Divine Shields in play, well, unstable Ghoul will pretty much kill off all the Divine Shields, which will open up your opponent to a whole lot of hurt from your guys, because Divine Shield otherwise absorbs all of the damage, every little point of damage, just huge chunks of damage. You know, 1 damage to all your guys, it makes them a little softer, but you're getting rid of a very valuable resource. So unstable Ghoul can be very powerful, especially against Divine Shield based strategies, and trust me, there are a lot of reasons to play Divine Shield based strategies right now. Moving on up to tier 3, we've got the Bronze Warden, who is a great example of something that works well not only within the Divine Shield strategy, but in the Dragon strategy, because he's a 2-1 dragon. He also is probably the first minion that's actually introducing the reborn mechanic to Battlegrounds, outside of, well, Lich King, who pretty much just grants it to one single minion, not even of your choice. With the Bronze Warden, he has Divine Shield and Reborn as a 2-1 dragon. That is a lot of synergy to come up in all at once, but it's really important that he has this Reborn mechanic, because that means when he comes back, well, let's be honest, he can come back. He also has Divine Shield, which basically means he is not just a 2-1, he's essentially a 4-1 repeating kind of minion. He can deal up to 8 damage, and that's just before you boost him up with all this sort of thing. So he's an incredibly powerful minion right there. Needless to say, Bronze Warden is a ridiculously strong card, especially in this format, which is probably one of the reasons he's only a 2-1. Because if he was any stronger than that, jeez. Like, pretty much it's just like take him that minion and multiply its attack by 4. That's how much damage you could spread out across the board in a single fight with that Bronze Warden. Very powerful minion right there. And then we get to the Hangry Dragon, and yes, it is called the Hangry Dragon, because he's hungry, and he's angry. He's hangry. He's actually a 4-4 dragon, and whenever, basically at the start of your turn, basically after you have just come out of combat, which that's how that works, as I found out using a Hangry Dragon myself, basically, if you won the last combat, he'll get +2/+2. So he's kind of a snowball-y minion, where it's like he can get really, really strong, really, really fast, but it takes time, right? It just takes a little bit of time for him to get to that point. And you really want to be in a position where you're constantly winning in order for Hangry Dragon to get the most value. Well, if you're not winning your matchups, then you're not really making a whole lot of use out of Hangry Dragon, which is kind of my biggest problem with Hangry Dragon, is that he can be really strong and he can be really snowbally, but you need to start the momentum train on that. If you don't start the momentum, he's just a 4-4, and that eventually gets power creeped really hard in Battlegrounds. So, valuable, but only to a certain extent. Next we get into the tier 4 minions, and this is where we really get to see some more of this synergies with dragons and other things, like Draconic Enforcer, which is a 3/6 dragon that whenever one of your minions loses Divine Shield gets +2/+2. That's really, really good, and he's tapping into that Divine Shield strategy again, where it's like, hey, if your minions have Divine Shield, he gets better, and he will just continue to get better. So, needless to say, that's really strong, and I mean, if you run into an unstable Ghoul and you lose, like, 2-3 Divine Shields, that's +4/+4, +6/+6, that's really, really strong. Suddenly he becomes a really dangerous minion, and a really big minion, and that's not even getting into the golden version, where you could get +4/+4 whenever you lose a Divine Shield. That's super strong. It's actually one of the reasons I got to carry him one game really, really hard, so needless to say, definitely keep an eye out for this guy when you get over to tier 4, because it's going to be really strong. So next we get to the Herald of Flame, which is a 5/4 dragon that is identified as being part of the warrior class, who also has a really powerful ability in and of himself, where if he does overkill, he gets to deal 3 damage to the leftmost enemy minion. And if he continues to kill things, he can actually sweep out a board of really low-costed minions, or really low health minions rather, and it's just like, it can be really dangerous. Like, that's really playing with fire on that one. And when it gets to certainly later on in the game, it's not as powerful, but if he gets to be golden, then it can be potentially powerful at that point. But generally speaking, Herald of Flame is really more so for those big, wide boards that just have, like, all these little tiny minions, and it's just like bam, 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 bam. I fell victim to Herald of Flame a couple of times, and man, I gotta say, he can be very powerful when in the right hands. But he also can be pretty useless at times. It really kind of depends on what minion he runs into, And that's kind of the kicker on that, right? Like, that's the theme of Battlegrounds in a nutshell. He's really good when he runs into the correct minion. If he doesn't run into the correct minion, he sucks. And then we get to come across Cobalt Scalebane, which if anybody has played in the Frozen Throne era, you're probably familiar with this card. It's a 5/5 dragon that at the end of your turn gives +3 attack to another one of your minions, no matter what it is, and that can be a really powerful, bump. I mean, let's be honest, if you're giving +3 attack to all minions, that's really strong in and of itself. So just imagine doing the exact same thing, but to any single minion. Cobalt Scalebane can be very powerful, and when it ramps up, it can be really strong too. And then we get to hit on Tier 5, and that's when we get into stuff like Murozond. Murozond! The legendary Murozond! Now this is a very interesting minion. It's a 5/5 dragon that has this battle cry where basically, if after a combat or something like that, you'll be able to play Murozond, and based on the minions that your opponent had in that particular combat, you're gonna get one of those at random added to your hand, which can be actually pretty helpful, honestly. Like, I was able to get a triple and get an upgrade off of a Murozond, which was completely unexpected, but it's also something that's not going to happen every single time. In fact, it's very unlikely that that will happen. It really depends more so on the matchups that you face off against. So you wouldn't really play Murozond in your dragon strategy if your last opponent was like a Murloc player, you know what I mean? So it's better when you're facing off against somebody who has a similar strategy to you, so you can essentially use Murozond to benefit off of that strategy. And that can be extended to beyond dragon synergies. Like if your opponent's playing beasts and you're also playing beasts and you see something they have that you want, grab a Murozond and put it down, get something out of that, and it can be very beneficial. So Murozond is definitely a welcome addition to the roster on this one. Next up, we've got one of the big reasons to play with dragons, Twilight Emissary, which is a 6/8 dragon with taunt, already pretty good, but it also has the battle cry where you give a fellow dragon +3/+3. This is like the single biggest individual buff on any one particular tribe of minion. This is a really big buff. Maybe if Alexstrasza gets a Twilight Emissary as a dragon option, pick it, take it. Do something with it. That +3/+3 is nothing to snuff at. And it's on a 6/8 taunt body. Like, that's like Siegebreaker, but even better than Siegebreaker. Like, it's just play Twilight Emissary. It's definitely one of the biggest reasons to play dragons right now. It's very, very strong. I wouldn't even be surprised if it got nerfed at some point or other. But that does lead me into something a little bit bigger than that. And that's our other Tier 5 legendary minion, Gore, the Untamed. And he is a 2/4 dragon, but, don't let the low stats fool you, because at the end of each turn, he gets +1/+1 for every single dragon you control. That includes Gore himself, so he's already basically getting a +1/+1 by himself. But you combine this on a dragon team, even if there's only a couple other dragons, he's still getting +3/+3 at the end of every turn. Gore is single-handedly the biggest reason to play dragons right now, because I've seen Gores that just go up to over 100 in stats. That is ridiculous in terms of Battlegrounds. Even for Battlegrounds, that's ridiculous. And it's one of the biggest reasons you might want to start arguing for poisonous minions being a little bit more available outside of Toxfin and my X-Nap. But it's something that's just really powerful, really potent, really dangerous. So keep Gore in mind, because this guy is going to completely destroy and demolish entire boards and just entire fields and entire heroes, and it's going to end this man's whole career. And now we get bumped up into Tier 6, where we run into some of our first non-dragon synergy stuff. I mean, it's not the only non-dragon synergy stuff, but it's some of the first new minions that basically don't have any interesting to do with dragons at this moment. And that includes minions like Holy Mackerel. Are you serious? Really, guys? Really? The Holy Mackerel. I get it, because he's a Murloc, and he's also like holy, you know, because he's a paladin minion. Oh, that's so clever, isn't it? Just... Anyways, Holy Mackerel. He is an 8/4 Murloc that whenever a friendly minion loses Divine Shield, he gets Divine Shield. I mean, he doesn't get it if he loses Divine Shield. That's just simply cyclical, and that would basically mean he's an invincible minion. I hope that's not how that works. You might as well try him out, especially if you end up getting like Toxfin, where you can make him, you know, poisonous, and then he's like got Divine Shield and poisonous, and that's practically like, what, 2 adaptations from Gentle Megasaur in a nutshell? So hey, Holy Mackerel, he might be pretty good, but he also might be, I don't know, way too late in the game. It's just, like, tier 6 is a hard enough tier to get to in a normal game. Holy Mackerel is just kind of like, I don't know, maybe not. We shall see. But Murlocs are not the only thing that get a little bit of an upgrade. We also get an upgrade to demons in the form of Imp Mama, and this minion is really, really good. It's a 6/8 demon that whenever it takes damage, it summons a completely random demon and gives it taunt. This is actually really strong when you get right down to it. Like, whenever this thing takes damage, suddenly there's another demon that just shows up. And it could be stuff that's like low on the end. It's like, it'd be Imp Gang Boss or Fiendish Servant, but it could also be stuff like Voidwalker and Mal'Ganis. It's pretty noteworthy, honestly. Like, Imp Mama may be one of the strongest demons in Battlegrounds to date. If you get an Imp Mama in your choices, try her out, because I'm telling you, this is a really powerful effect. And it may be low-key, but it's like, especially if your opponent ends up with like enough minions that it's just like little tiny 1/1s, just imagine them running into Imp Mama, and then Mama summons out another demon, and that demon takes a bunch of damage, and then they run into Imp Mama, and Imp Mama's like, I gotta get more demons, more children's, more imps, more imps! Then we get into Calico's Arcane Aspect. Another iteration of Calicos, including the 2/8 dragon stats, but he also has a very interesting effect where after you play a minion with Battlecry, he gives your fellow dragons +1/+1. That is so good, but it's also, at tier 6, it almost feels like it's a little bit more of a win more card at that point. I mean, by that point, ideally, you've already got Razor Gore, and he's already gotten a bunch of stat boosts, and he's already been upgraded to gold if you're really, really lucky on that. But Calico really does feel like he's more of a win more condition for dragons. Like, he's not necessary for the dragon build to be good. There's some synergies here and there, but I don't really expect Calicos to be a major performer, partially because tier 6 is hard enough to get to as it is, but also because you really need a specific dragon-centered strategy to make Calicos work, and at that point, he's basically just a win more card. So that's just my quick take on that. And finally, the last tier 6 minion, the last minion being introduced into the game, is Nadina the Red, and she is a pretty powerful 7/4 minion who has some dragon support. Where she dies, she gives all your dragons Divine Shield, and this is pretty good because, well, Divine Shield's really strong, and you get that around to your various dragons. Nadina is definitely a very supportive card that can also be a little bit win more at times, but it's just really, really strong to be able to deal 7 damage to any minion, but then also give your dragons Divine Shield, because a lot of the dragons right now don't naturally have Divine Shield, Bronze Warden being a little bit of an example as the only dragon with Divine Shield, so giving them all Divine Shield all at once, that's really, really strong. So you can set Nadina the Red all the way to the left, run her into something, and then boom, all your dragons have Divine Shield. They're protected from poisonous, they're protected from everything. It's really, really good. This is one of the reasons Unstable Ghoul is also really important to keep in mind, because it'll pop all those bubbles and such. Needless to say, very powerful for dragon-centered strategies. Definitely would recommend. And yeah, that's pretty much it on that. So now that we've taken care of the long, long list of minions that have been introduced into the game, it's time to get the last little bits of Battlegrounds updates, because this patch has been so huge already, this video has been so long already, but we've almost there, we almost got it. Stick with me for a little, like another couple minutes or so, because we also got to talk about how George the Fallen has gotten his hero power buffed, so that way he's not spending 4 gold, he's only spending 3 gold, and that's really, really good. Like, 4 gold always felt like it was just too much for that. Like, Divine Shield, yes, it is very powerful, so it's understandable to have the gold cost be so high, but with George the Fallen, it was always a matter of, like, trying to figure out do I actually have to choose between giving a minion Divine Shield or actually upgrading stuff or buffing things or just doing things better? And it never really panned out well enough in George's favor. But now with all the new Divine Shield support plus this little buff, George the Fallen looks like he's going to be a lot more viable in the weeks to come, or the days to come even. Like, he's going to be pretty strong, so I would definitely keep an eye out on him. The other two big things that have come up within the grounds of what is available in Battlegrounds right now is that Sneed's Old Shredder has been demoted from a tier 6 minion to a tier 5 minion, which is totally fine. Like, his Death Rattle was never really something that felt like it was justified at tier 6 any more than, like, Void Walker's was. And then Mama Bear's actually gotten her nerf now rebuffed, so instead of being a 4/4 that buffs beasts that gets summoned by +4/+4, she has been changed back into a 5/5 that bumps up beasts by +5/+5, which I think is totally fine at this point because, well, let's be honest, beasts are kind of the weaker tribe right now. They're definitely not a very strong, impactful tribe at this particular moment, especially when you compare them to dragons. Dragons are just really, really strong. Divine Shield is really, really prevalent. So having something around to be able to bump things up again for beasts just makes them more viable again, gives them a reason to, it gives players a reason to play beasts and stuff. I think this is a nice, welcome change to the game. Might as well give it back, you know, give something back when you're introducing all of these crazy buffy things. So I think that's pretty good. In addition to all of that, the tier 6, the cost of going into tier 6 is going down from 11 gold to 10 gold. Again, another quality of life change to the game because, let's be honest, it just never felt very good to upgrade into tier 6. And last but certainly not least, we gotta talk about all the stuff that's been removed from the game. And pretty much it's mostly in minions, but there was one hero that got removed from the game. Rest in peace, Professor Putricide. You were a terrible hero with a terrible power. Let's be perfectly honest, like, let's just be perfectly honest, Putricide was just terrible. And then, of course, we gotta talk about all the removed minions, so let me see what the list is here. We are removing Shielded Minibot, Anoyotron, Mounted Raptor, Phalanx Commander, Psychotron, Tortolon, Shellraiser, Piloted Sky Golem, Festerroot Hulk, Boogie Monster, and the Sated Threshadon. Whew! That is a lot of talk. That's a huge update. This video is already so long. And that's not even getting to stuff like the Mage Pack bundle that's available. Khadgar is available to be purchased again. We've got a new rotation for Arena, but who cares about that? Who even plays Arena that watches the channel? I don't play Arena. Maybe that's something I talk about in another video, but I gotta figure out if I'm gonna talk about that or about Arena. I am just gonna go lose it. Battlegrounds is gonna happen. Battlegrounds this, Battlegrounds that. We gotta go dragons!